Hey there, you're tuning in to LowKey by Oki, our easygoing sessions for hotel professionals where we chat about industry trends, issues, and solutions.
Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to the very first podcast with the LowKey by Oki pod, and the very first one that we're doing online. We're doing this so we can have some really amazing guests that sometimes have a hard time traveling to beautiful Amsterdam, and so we can reach a bigger pool for our amazing audience. And today we have someone that is nothing short of amazing. She's an author, she's a founder, she's doing great gigs at the hotel school. She wrote a book, and recently she published a diagram that is simplifying the hotel technology landscape, one of the most complex things in the world, maybe. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so happy to bring to you at the LowKey by Oki podcast, Ira Vouk. Welcome to the podcast, Ira.
Hi. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for the warm introduction. Oh my God, I started blushing here behind the stage.
Absolutely, you deserve it. Hey, how are you doing? Welcome to the pod.
Great. It's a nice sunny morning in San Diego here. Nothing to complain about. Life is great. Holidays coming up, and I'm excited about this conversation. My favorite topic, as you know.
Yeah, is it?
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, Ira, with all of these things that you've been doing and being like a legend in the industry, like how did it come about that you got into hospitality, and why do you love it so much?
I think many people have probably seen my story on LinkedIn, and I've mentioned it before also in my book. I actually started in housekeeping, and this is like a typical American dream story that I love to tell, that tells you like anything is possible if you have a dream, if you have a goal. As an immigrant 20 years ago, I came to America, to a little town of Syracuse, New York, and my first job was cleaning rooms at a hotel, a couple hotels and toilets at a truck stop. And I worked 90 hours a week, and this is how it all started. Wow. And then slowly, gradually, I started moving up to different operational roles in the property, and then corporate roles in the management company, and then starting my own thing with revenue management consulting, starting a tech company, first RMS that had machine learning built in. And this is how I got into tech, and it just consumed me.
And then after 20, I don't know, many years.
20. It's been actually exactly 20 years.
Okay, good.
August, yeah, this August. Mm-hmm.
So after about 20 years, you decided now is the time to simplify the world of the hotel tech landscape. And you created this diagram that many people have seen roaming around LinkedIn and the internet. Why did you decide to make this?
Well, before I started simplifying it, it took me a while to understand how complex it is, right? And it doesn't look like this from like when you start, like, for example, a lot of technology vendors, founders of tech companies, when they get into our industry, and I was one myself, 13 years ago when I started my tech company, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know how convoluted this space was. It took me years to understand all the dynamics of the relationships, all the different types of segments in our industry and different categories of technologies, and the integration dependencies between them, and who is at the top, who rules the world, and all these things that how it works. It took me years. And then when I finally understood it, and my brain works in the manner that I accumulate enough of critical information in my brain, I started wanting to share. And when I share, I structure it the way that is very easy to communicate to others. And this is what I do. Like when I write my books, write my articles, the same thing with the tech ecosystem. My brain just automatically decided, and I wrote it on a napkin. Like I woke up in Colorado. I actually saw it in my dream. I woke up
Nice.
And I put it on a napkin literally within like 20 minutes. And then I started inputting it in the computer. Within a few hours, it was born. And it was embraced by the industry because it is really easy to read and it's really easy to understand. But behind it, there is so much. Like there's so much knowledge that went in it and so many complicated things. And I think people just feel great about themselves when they see it and then understand it. And that's why I think it's been very popular in our industry.
So for people listening in, it's going to be people that see this live, but there'll also be a lot of people just listening to the audio. We will link, of course, to Ira's diagram of the hotel tech ecosystem. But you have stuff like guest apps, revenue stuff, PMS stuff, CRM, like distribution stuff, marketing, sales. There's tons of things. I sometimes speak to founders who just say, who have like exited companies in the hotel tech space and then try another industry. And they're like, it's so much easier
Right.
when you're not in the hotel
There's
tech
a reason
space.
for that, right? Yeah.
But why is it that it's so complicated?
Yeah, great question. And that's why I said there's a reason for that. So that is the reason behind the complexity of our tech ecosystem is the complexity of the industry itself. Different, and the fragmentation of the hospitality industry. And if we take lodging in particular, and the diagram I wrote is for lodging segment of the hospitality industry. The lodging part of our industry is very, very complex itself. It's fragmented. There's so many different types of players there in terms of the segments that we are in. There are independents, there are franchised companies, there's mid-market with different brands, but there are also different types of hotels, like of lodging properties within those segments, the luxury, mid-scale, limited service. There are different sizes. And there are different stakeholders. For example, there's if you take a franchise properties, there is a brand, there is a management company, there is an owner. And if you take the independent property, there's over 1 million, like almost 1 million of individual owners, operators, and they all have a different opinion on how things should work and what they need. So because the industry itself is so fragmented, this resulted in a very, very complex situation on the supplier side, technology supplier side, because these little companies that exist, and some of them are of course large and have scaled in our industry, but many are very small. They exist to serve a specific niche, specific segment, specific type, specific even use case sometimes of our industry. That's why there are so many of them. And it's very, very hard. It's impossible for one company to target everything. So that's why we don't have a situation where we would have like one PMS that works for all, or one CRS that works for all, or any type of technology solution that would actually be great for all different types of clients, customers of technology that exist. And that's the main reason, obviously. And there's also integration dependencies, which we can also kind of touch on.
Let's not go there. We always go there.
It's a big one.
And all of these different use cases, Ira, do they stem from that there are so many different needs from the travelers, or do they stem from just operators thinking we just have to create a new brand because there's a little something, or we have to differentiate? Like, what's the driving factor behind all of these use cases, you think?
That's a great question. So the thing is that the different types of needs of the travelers, they actually add to the complexity, but the complexity exists in itself, and it exists because there have been historically, like the way our industry has been developing, different types of businesses started existing. Some are private, some are public companies, some are small and large, but those businesses, they also cater to different types of customer segments that kind of overlap also. And there is, we know there's leisure, there is business, there's bleisure, there's group, there's individual businesses or customers. So that complexity on that side, which is not as bad as complexity on our side, but it kind of adds up. So it's both, but the fragmentation is the major part of the fragmentation is on our side, not on the customer side. But again, it just adds to the situation.
Yeah. We are going to come back to whether we think that we will have more or less fragmentation in the future, but let's come back to that.
Yeah.
I noticed from the diagram that the PMS is kind of in the center, in the heart. Yeah. When I go to trade shows, there's often a conversation. Should a CD, let's say, let's not use too many acronyms, a customer data platform, CRM, a customer relationship management, where you store data, should that be the heart? or should the PMS remain the heart of the hotel? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I love talking about it as well. So the thing is that we probably wish we hoteliers wish there was less dependency on the PMS as the main piece of our tech stack.
Why is that?
Because it causes issues. So when it comes to integrations, because PMS sits at the core of our tech stack, and the reason for that is because it sits on the most valuable data in our data ecosystem, which is another conversation. It's the reservations and the stay data, right? And the ARI data as well. So the PMS right now, in most cases, is the source of truth. And because of that, it kind of dictates the rules. So 90% of technology solutions in our industry can't function independently on their own as standalone solutions. They have to consume the data from the PMS in order to function. You take an RMS, you take a CRM, whatever it is, it has to get data from the PMS. And because of that dependency, that causes a lot of issues and I was in those shoes 13 years ago when I created an RMS company, where I realized I have a product, amazing product, it can't function if I don't have any integrations. The problem is also there are almost 1,000 PMS providers in our industry. So
is it that many?
It is that many, yes. And I mean, many of them are
but if you break it down, because the 80-20 rule has to exist there too.
Yes, absolutely.
So how many do you think make up like 80% of the market?
It's hard to say. I don't think there has been a single company that has dared to actually analyze that and
I think you should reveal it now on the LowKey podcast.
We should. No, I know that Skift has tried to do the research in this area. I don't know if anybody has the specific data on that, because it's really hard to measure. Hotels normally don't publish what PMS they use. There's some data about, Opera has, 16% of market share in terms of the room count. But then if you take the property count, because they normally are in hotels that are larger, right? Yeah. And then, we have cloud beds that are, 15, 20, 25,000, wherever they are right now. But there's 1.2 million properties in the world, and many PMSs are local, they're only in one language, Italian language, for example. And many PMSs were born because somebody built them in-house. So there's just tons of them. And if you're a tech provider, a non-PMS tech provider, and you want to cover the entire total addressable market, TAM, of the entire world, you have to build 1,000 integrations.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe if you want to cover, 50% of the world, you won't probably build 300 integrations. That's still a lot. That requires resources. So that's, I think, what tech providers don't really realize when they get into our industry, before they actually are faced with this reality. So this causes a lot of issues with scaling tech companies in our industry, and it also causes fragmentation.
Yeah, definitely. I can testify to that. I was always jealous of companies like Lighthouse or OTA Insight, that they could just scale a solution where they could just get data online.
When I do consulting for tech providers, the first thing I tell them, if there is a way to build a product, at least a version of your product or a module of your product that doesn't have a PMS dependency, absolutely go and do it, because that's going to allow you to scale much faster than if you do have to have the data.
Yeah, very good. Hey, so a question that I think many people think about, independent hotels have a lot of flexibility. Branded hotels come with guaranteed distribution, maybe loyalty programs, etc. But in regards to if you were an owner of a nice property with a specific need of creating a really, really great kind of best in breed tech stack for your property, would you choose to go brand, or would you choose to stay independent, and why?
Yeah, definitely not brand. I'm sorry, those brands out there. There's many great brands, especially when it comes to franchise companies. And we have to also differentiate between mid-market brands and franchise top 10, 12, whatever that number is at this point. The top 10 franchise large companies like Wyndham, Marriott, Hyatt, you name it. We all know those names. They have very, very strict guidelines around their tech stack. So they have approved vendors, and it's, there's a reason for that. They have to make sure everything is seamlessly integrated. They can't just let anybody in through the door. So those guidelines are very strict in terms of what their franchisees are able to use in terms of technology provider. Like take an RMS, for example, it has to be an approved vendor that is integrated within the tech stack, the PMS, the CRS. So if you are a franchisee of a large, large one of the top 10 companies, you're very limited in terms of your flexibility, how to build your tech stack. So if you have a use case that as a business, you want to be successful and only this specific provider or maybe a number of providers can cover this use case, but it's not an approved provider by the brand, you're out of luck. There's nothing you can do. You have to use the approved providers. So that means that you're less efficient, you're less profitable, your customers are less happy, right? So if you're an independent provider, the situation right now is that independent operators are much more flexible and they have access to much more modern technology than brands. It wasn't, it didn't used to be like that 50, 100 years ago. It was reversed because the brands had money, the brands were innovative, they were building cool tech in-house, but history showed that they're just not good at maintaining their technology and keeping it, up to speed with the 21st century and making sure it's modern in the cloud and it has all the AI components that are needed. And that's why the off-the-shelf third-party solutions there's just so many of them that are great young startup companies that can't get into the branded space because of all those politics and policies and regulations and the approval process. So they always, normally 90% of them or more start from the independent space because it's just much easier to get into, harder to scale, but easier to get into. That's why independent operators have a wide variety of choices of technology that they can how they can build their tech stack.
Yeah, for sure. We've gone that journey. The first 5-6 years of our company, we had no big chain. And then you get the first one, and then you have to professionalize, then you have to have audits, and you have to do certain things.
And then also when you get a big client like that, let's say if it's a mid-market brand, let's say it's 100, 200 hotels. But then if you're a small startup company, you start working for that client. Like you are there, I would say.
But I've heard that many times, and I saw someone post on LinkedIn, it was like some analysis whether a PMS provider was innovative or customer first. And I just commented, like, if you're innovative, you're by default customer first because you're doing innovation should stem from what your customers want. And then a lot of people commented on my comment, no, because if you have a huge customer, you become you work for that customer.
That's a very good point. Yes.
I like to think that maybe there's some virtue in having that people work with you also because you have a shared vision, and how you get there can be a little bit this or that route. But what we decided very early on was to have a super well-defined ideal customer profile. So even if we build something for like a big chain, it will almost always benefit everyone else too. So
that is great. Yeah. And this is kind of circles back to what we discussed in the beginning. There are many segments in our industry, and it's hard for a tech company. It's very, very hard to be able to serve them all. And I wouldn't even recommend when I work with tech companies as a consultant, I always tell them, find your niche and be good at what you do for that specific profile of a customer. Maybe it's multiple profiles, but you can't cover the entire industry. If you're good for independent operators, great. And there are players that have been able to scale again, like, Cloudbed is a good example. Large company, they have scaled in the independent space, but there are players that are really good in the mid-market, and there are players that are like Opera by Micros and Oracle and in that space. So there's stuff for everyone, and that's why, again, there is a fragmentation of our industry as a result.
Hey, so something else. I was in Dubai the other week, and I talked to two revenue managers. Mm-hmm. One was a revenue manager for an asset management company. He had a bunch of brands underneath him, hotels in Dubai. And the other one worked for Hilton. So the asset management revenue manager, I asked them, what do you guys get your bonus based on? And the asset manager guy, he was incentivized on gross operating profit.
Awesome.
And the other guy, Hilton, what do you think he was incentivized on?
Oh my God. No, of course, RevPAR.
Of course, RevPAR. Yeah.
I love
and the SDR ranking, RGI.
Yeah.
why is RevPAR such a prevalent benchmark in our industry?
Okay, great. I love this. I love this. So going back to the conversation in the beginning, the fragmentation, the three-legged stool, right? We have situation where we have different stakeholders in our industry. We have the owner, we have the operator, which is represented by a management company,
Yeah.
and we have the brand, the franchisor. So these three different stakeholders, they have different needs and different ways to measure success. The owners actually care about the profit because that's why they're in business in most cases. There's some exceptions, but they're in the business because they want the cash flow, they want money, which is measured in GoPAR. And that's why when you talk to asset managers, we talk to owners, this is what they're after because they want to make money. I mean, that's their investment. But the management companies, the operators, in many cases are management companies, their contracts with the owners are structured around RevPAR. It's a percentage off of RevPAR, not even total RevPAR. It's just room revenue, top line room revenue. So they're incentivized by only growing RevPAR, even if it hurts the bottom line, if it goes against the profits, which it can. Like mathematically, there are many situations where profit and RevPAR can go in opposite directions. And then we take franchise companies. Again, their contracts with the owners are structured around RevPAR growth. Plus, there is stock price and other things. But yes, they're after RevPAR, and this is how they measure their success. So the thing is that our industry has been driven mainly by management companies and franchisors because they have had stronger voice since the beginning of the evolution of the revenue management discipline, let's say 30, 40 years ago. So they've been driving the development of the revenue management discipline. Hence the name. It shouldn't even be revenue. It should be profit, right? But we named it revenue because they wanted it. So they've been driving the development of the discipline in their direction. And that's why there's almost not a single RMS right now that has profit as the target for optimization.
Yeah.
The one that I built, not to brag, but we did have all the components necessary, assuming we have the data, which is another issue. Now there's a question, how do you bring in expenses? But that's a separate conversation. But this is the realities right now. This is why we haven't really been evolving in the direction of maximizing profit. But right now, owners, asset management companies, they have a stronger voice, and we're hearing them finally.
I also think it very much sounds like we're going to go into that direction more and more, that we talk more about RevPAR, GoPAR, etc. But you have to change people's incentives in order to change behavior. So it has to start there. Hey, we're almost on time for it, but because Fabrizia, who's managing the podcast, is not here, I'm going to take the liberty of extending it with a few minutes.
Sure.
There's something very interesting that I want to talk to you about, and sometimes you talk about, where is the industry in like 5 years or something, but I thought we would take a really long leap. So where are we in 30 years from now?
30 years. Yeah, that's a big benchmark. So I think what we will naturally achieve as an industry is simplification of our ecosystem. Both on the buyer and supplier side, and mainly on the supplier side. So if you take, when I teach at San Diego State, when I talk to my students, I use the example of a cell phone market, right? Right now, as I mentioned, we have 1,000 PMS providers. So if you use the correlation of the cell phone market, it's like the operating system of a phone, right? So imagine if you had cell phones and you would have 1,000 different operating systems. And if you want to build an app, if you want to target the entire market, you would want to build it for 1,000 different operating systems. That's a lot of work. So in the cell phone market, we only have two, right? Mainly, we have Android and we have iOS. And I think this is where we will eventually go as the hospitality industry, in the tech space of our hospitality industry, from 1,000, maybe not to 2, maybe we'll get to 20, 30 tops, but it's going to be much smaller number of PMS providers that will have sophisticated and rich marketplaces like an app store on your phone. So if you're a tech provider, you would build only to a certain number, a handful of PMSs. You wouldn't have to build to 2, 3, 400 PMSs. And so for a tech provider, for a seller of technology, it will be a much easier situation to deal with. And then on the buyer side, it's going to be like installing an app from an app store. Like if you want to if you have a specific PMS that you're running your property on, and if you want to subscribe to an RMS system, for example, right now, as we know, it takes 2-3 months. You go to a trade show, maybe you do demos, you speak to different vendors, you understand how they work, you pick one, you subscribe before you know what you're getting yourself into. You sign the contract for 3 years. A few months later, you realize it doesn't work for you. You can't get out of the contract. You're screwed, and on and on. So with the new model, this cell phone market model, as I call it, you're going to be able to install an app from the marketplace that the PMS provides. You will be able to do a free 30-day trial because the data is going to be seamlessly flowing. You won't need 10 weeks of onboarding process with the integration being built, because everything is going to be in place. And you're going to be able to try it out for free for 30 days. So it's going to be a full self-service SaaS model. I think this is where we're going. I can't say when exactly that's going to happen, whether it's going to be 5, 10, or 20 or 30 years from now. But I think naturally it will happen, because this is what different markets have gone through, the path that we're on right now. Very similar situation in retail. And again, cell phone markets went through that. Social media went through that. So I think eventually we'll get there, and it's going to be a happier place for everyone.
Let's see when we get there. Interesting vision, Ira. Hey, I have one last question, but we need to keep it super short. So I will ask you to keep it to 1 or 2 words. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's side guy, he unfortunately passed away last week or 2 weeks ago. He had a very interesting concept called inversion. So you have some people who chase trends, things that change all the time, and they try to create a company or a business to chase those trends. Charlie Munger had this idea that instead of doing that, I'm just going to figure out what never changes. And I'm going to double down and solve for that. I thought that was very fascinating. So on that note, answer in a couple of words only, what about the guest needs do you think will never change?
They'll need to continue traveling.
Okay, very good. We'll keep it to that. Then I will go bing. Then yes. Our part 2 of this podcast, as always, is a humble brag or just anything that you would like to share with our listeners. Floor is yours, Ira.
Thank you. I'll try to make it short. I think a lot of people already know me. If you don't, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer your questions, or you can find a lot of interesting content on my LinkedIn page. You can also go to my website, iravouk.com, which is just how my name is spelled. And this is where you can find the diagram that I put together. You can also find it on my LinkedIn page. I think my recent brainchild is my online learning course that I love to promote. I have a lot of very, very satisfied, very happy students. And it's gaining popularity and a lot of 5-star reviews. The online learning course is about hospitality technology. Surprise. It's a deep dive in the hospitality technology ecosystem. That's what it's called. A short 4-hour course, very, very reasonably priced. And it's the first online learning course in our industry that is devoted to hospitality technology. So that's my baby. And I would like to spread the word, spread the knowledge of this convoluted ecosystem that we just discussed to a wider audience. So that's essentially what I teach at the San Diego State, and that's available for everyone now.
Super, Ira. Thank you for having LowKey by Oki being part of your mission. It was a real pleasure talking to you. I learned a lot, and I think our listeners did too. And let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It was definitely a lot of fun. Thanks for your questions.
Bye-bye.